Good evening. So just how old is storytelling? It goes back past the written word, goes past the spoken word. It goes all the way back to the first human drawings that were found in the caves by Chavez France 30,000 years ago. Storytelling has taught history, has taught culture, art, science, morals, from hieroglyphs to the spoken word to the first story ever written down, which was Gilgamesh, to music, to books, to mass communication. Story has helped us all understand one another as human beings. And you know what our best favorite stories are? The ones that have humans triumphing over adversity. Storytelling is one of the most useful things that humans do. And we hope that tonight you'll enjoy the presentations. Welcome. We ask you to relax and turn off your cell phones if it's still on. We want you to sit back and use your imagination to bring to mind the things that you hear tonight in the stories that have been prepared just for you. Our first teller tonight is Jonathan Frank.
Hello. I will be telling the story of Anansi and the Liars Contest. Now, sometimes in Africa, there are droughts, long periods with no rain where very little food grows, and all of the creatures get very hungry. And it was during one particularly long drought that Anansi the spider was walking along a ridge, and down below him, eyeing him hungrily, were a flea, a fly, and a moth. And they thought that Anansi looked so delicious. But the problem was that the three of them could never hope to overpower Anansi and eat him. But maybe, since Anansi liked to play tricks, they could trick Anansi into letting them eat him. And so they devised a plan, a liar's contest, where each of them would tell a preposterous story and try to get Anansi to say that they were lying. Because you see, the way a liar's contest works is if you can tell a story that is so fantastic that someone else says, "Oh, that's a lie," well, then you win, and the other person loses. And so each of them thought of a really ridiculous story to tell Anansi. And then they went to Anansi and they said, "Anansi, we would like to have a contest. And whoever wins this contest gets to eat the loser." And now Anansi, he was hungry too, and curious. And so he said, "All right, what's the contest?" "It's a liar's contest, you see. Each of us will tell a story, and whichever one says, 'Oh, that's a lie,' well, that one loses and is eaten by the others." And Anansi agreed. And so the flea got up first. "I am the greatest flea who has ever lived. When I was a boy, I sucked a lion completely dry, and all of the other lions ran away in fright. And so I said to them, 'If you make me your king, well, then I will not eat any more of you.' And so now I, Flea, am the king of the lions." And the flea, the fly, and the moth got ready for Anansi to say, "Oh, that's a lie." But instead, Anansi just nodded wisely and said, "Oh, what a good story. And oh, so true." And so next was the fly's turn. And he straightened his wings and said, "Before I was born, my father had 40 acres of land. And he was out one day clearing that land with a scythe.
You see, he was chopping, and he cut his foot. And my father cut his foot so bad that he couldn't work anymore. And so before I was even born, I had to go out and finish clearing that land. And before I was even born, I had to go out and plow that land. And before I was even born, I had to go out and plant corn and then harvest that corn. And then I put all of the corn into a great big silo so that by the time I was born, my father was a very wealthy man indeed. And it was all because of the work that I did before I was even born. And the flea, the fly, and the moth got ready to pounce on Anansi. And Anansi just said, "Oh, what a good story. And oh, so true." And so now was the moth's turn. And the moth was the greatest liar around. So the moth took a moment and said, "I was out hunting antelope the other day, you see. And I saw a big one in the field coming towards me. It was the size of 2 elephants. And so I picked up my rifle and I shot. And then I took off to where it fell. And when I got there, it was magnificent. I chopped it up and I skinned it. I got it ready to take home. And I had just finished when I looked up and I saw the bullet that I had just shot coming towards the air, coming towards me in the air. And so I thought, it makes no sense to waste a good bullet. And so I just plucked it out of the air and I stuck it in my gun to use later. And so I was there with that antelope around me, and I thought, you know what? I would like to have a snack. But I didn't want to eat it out in the open because someone might come and take it from me, and I didn't want that. So instead, I carried the entire antelope in one trip up to the top of a tree. And when I got there, I lit a small fire, and I took a little bit of that antelope, and I cooked it, and I ate it, and it was so good. So I took, and I cooked, and I ate a little bit more, and a little bit more, until I had eaten the entire antelope. And by then I was so full, I could hardly move, let alone get down from a tree. And so I thought to myself, well, now what am I supposed to do? And then I remembered I had a rope back at home that would be perfect for lowering myself out of the tree. And so I went home, and I got the rope. And then I came back, and I tied the rope around my waist, and I lowered myself down. And that's my story. And the flea, the fly, and the moth looked at Anansi, ready to pounce. And Anansi just said, "Oh, what a good story. And oh, so true." Now it's my turn. You see, it was just the other day that I was out walking, and by the side of the road, I saw a coconut. And I picked up that coconut, and I went around asking if it belonged to anybody, and nobody claimed it, so I took it as my own. And I took it home, and I planted it in my garden. And the very next day, a magnificent coconut tree had grown from that coconut. And on that tree, there were 3 coconuts. And I thought to myself, you know what? I would like to eat some coconut today. And so I went out, and I picked a coconut off of that tree, and I cracked it open, and out of that coconut jumped a flea. And I thought that was very odd. So I took the second coconut, and I cracked it open, and out of that coconut flew a fly. And by now I was intrigued, so I grabbed the third coconut, and I cracked it open, and out of that coconut, you would never believe, out of that coconut came a moth. And so I sat there and I thought, well, that coconut tree belonged to me, and the coconuts that were on the tree belonged to me. So whatever was inside of those coconuts
also must belong to me. And so I thought, well, I haven't eaten any coconut yet. Instead, I will just eat my flea, my fly, and my moth. And it was no sooner than I had decided that they each ran away and left me alone. But today, well, today is my lucky day. Well, because here you are, my flea, and my fly, and my moth. And now, it only took a moment for the flea, the fly, and the moth to realize exactly what they had gotten themselves into. Because if they said, "Oh, so true," as Anansi had, well, then they would be admitting that they belonged to Anansi and he could eat them if he liked. But if they said, "Oh, that's a lie," well, then they would lose the contest, and Anansi could eat them anyways. And so after a moment of panic, they ran away, leaving Anansi alone, smiling to himself, before he also carried on his way.
Hello, my name is Dana, and I'm going to tell you an old tale. I'm going to tell you the tale of Puss in Boots. One time there was a very old miller who died, and he had 3 sons. To his first son, the oldest, he gave him the mill. His second son, who was the middle son, he gave him the donkey. His third son, Herman, was the youngest. He gave him a little bag of coins and a cat. Well, Herman thought, what am I going to do with this bag of coins and this cat? And then he said, oh, I know. It's warm now, but winter's coming, so I might as well skin this cat and make myself a pair of mittens. Well, the cat immediately jumped into action to save his life. And he said, no. You don't want to make a pair of mittens out of me, because if you make a pair of mittens out of me, then they'll wear out in a couple of years and you won't have anything. Just give me that bag of coins and I promise, I'll turn it into a fortune. Well, Herman had no choice. He knew that bag of coins wasn't going to do anything for him. The cat had pleaded for its life, so he gave the bag of coins to the cat. Well, the next day, the cat came back wearing a beautiful pair of boots and had a beautiful leather sack draped over his shoulder. And Herman looked at him and said, well, how is that going to help me? Oh, said Puss. Let me show you what I have in my bag. And he pulled out a pheasant. Well, being a poor miller's son, he'd never had a pheasant before in his life. Tonight we're going to eat like kings, said Puss in Boots. And they did. Now, while Herman was munching away on this pheasant, Puss in Boots said, do you like that pheasant? Is it good? Oh, yeah, it's really good. That's good, said Puss in Boots. Would you like to eat like that every night? Oh, I'm eating like a king. I'd love to eat like this every night. Good. Then you do everything I tell you from this day on, and I promise you, you're going to live like a king for the rest of your life. Okay, that sounds great, said Herman. Well, the next day, Puss got up early, put on his boots, he put on his little sack, and he went to a vast field. It was acres and acres and acres. Now, this field was owned by an ogre. And to get to this field, you went down the main road. And that road kept going and going until it turned into a smaller road, really only good for a carriage. And that road wound through the woods until you came to a gate, a big iron gate. And beyond that iron gate was the ogre's castle. Now, Puss wasn't worried about any of that today. He was going hunting. And today, he got himself a grouse. But he wasn't taking it back to Herman. He was going to take it to the king. And so he got to the king's palace and he presented this grouse to the king. Oh, said the king, this is quite nice. Who does this come from? "Oh," said Puss in Boots, "this comes from Count Herman." "Oh, Count Herman. I don't know Count Herman." "Oh, yes, Count Herman. He owns vast lands and a great castle." "Oh, is this so?" said the king. Well, the next day Puss came back with a turkey, and the day after that he came back with a pheasant. By this time the king was very, very impressed, and he said, "I should like to meet this Count Herman." Oh, yes, said Puss. You'll meet him, you'll meet him." Well, just then, the most glorious, beautiful princess walked into the room. Well, Puss in Boots was overwhelmed by her. And she said to her father, the king, "Father, today I would like to take a carriage ride, and I would like to go by the pond." Oh, all right," said the king. "Well, let me put on my riding clothes, and you go put on your riding clothes, and I'll get a carriage and some horses and some servants, and we'll go." Well, little Puss in Boots, his ears perked up, and he said, "I have to bid you adieu, and I will see you again very soon, I'm sure." "All right then," said the king, "and remember, tell Count Herman I would love to meet him." "Oh, yes, said Puss. You will." Well, little Puss in Boots, he ran back to Herman as fast as he could. And he said to Herman, "Okay, you have to do every single thing I tell you." "Okay," said Herman. "Sounds good. Am I going to get another pheasant?" "Yes, just do what I say." "Okay." So he and Herman, Puss in Boots and Herman, went down that road, and then they went down a path down to the pond. And Puss in Boots looked at Herman, and he said, "Herman, you have to take off all of your clothes, and I want you to put them under this rock, and I don't want any of those clothes peeking out from that rock, okay?" "Okay, sure, all right." So he took off all of his clothes, and he shoved them under that rock. "Okay, now, Herman, I need you to go out into the middle of the pond, and when I come back and I'm running down this path and I'm saying, 'Count Herman is drowning,' because you're now Count Herman." Okay, I'm Count Herman now. That's right. You're going to pretend like you're drowning, okay? Have you got that? "Yep, I got it. And so he walked out into the middle of the pond, and he stood there, and he waited for Puss in Boots to come back. Now, Puss ran back up that path, and he went up to the road, and he waited. And all of a sudden, he saw the king's carriage coming around. Oh, yes, he thought. And then when they were in sight of him, he started to jump around in the middle of the road. Oh, help! He was waving his little paws up and down. Help! And the king, he stopped that carriage, and he looked out and he said, "Oh, why, it's Puss in Boots. What's going on, Puss in Boots?" Oh, it's the most dreadful thing in the world. Oh, Count Herman, he's down in the pond, and he's drowning, and these robbers came, and they stole his clothes, and they stole his carriage, and they stole his horses. It's terrible." "Oh," said the king, "that is dreadful." And he ordered his servant, "Go down there and save the Count Herman right now." And so the servant ran down the path, and the king and Boots followed. Well, the servant pulled poor Count Herman out of the pond, and the king said, "Oh, this is such a travesty. I cannot believe what has happened to you." "Oh, yeah," he said, "it's terrible." And he looked at Puss, and Puss said, "That's right, it was terrible. The robbers stole everything." "Oh, yeah, they stole everything." "Well," said the king, "we can't have that. You can't go around like this. You're in no state to be seen." And so he ordered his servant to go back to the castle and get him some clothes. And that's just what he did. And when the servant came back, he dressed him in very fine clothes. Well, now that Herman, the poor miller's son, had taken a bath and was in fine clothes, he cut a pretty handsome figure. And when he walked up that path and got to the road and stood in front of that carriage, the princess looked out and thought, "Whoa, he's pretty good looking." And so the king said, "Well, you can't walk home. You need to go on a carriage ride with us." And Count Herman said, "Yeah, I do." And Puss said, "That's right, you need to go back to your castle. I need to go back to my castle." And so he loaded him into the carriage. Now, Puss in Boots said to the king, "Oh, now the servants weren't ready for you, for the king to come and visit. We're going to need to get the castle prepared for you. So why don't you take a leisurely stroll with that carriage, and I'll run on ahead and let the servants know that you're coming." So little Puss, he was running as fast as he could, and as he was running by the fields, he saw people working in the fields, and he said to them, "If the king comes by and asks you who owns this land, you are to tell them that it is the Count Herman. And if you don't, he's going to cut up every one of you and stick you in a pie." So they were very frightened by that. So when the king's carriage came by and the king leaned out and he said, "Who owns all of this land?" the people said, "It's Count Herman, it's Count Herman." Well, he was getting very impressed, as was the princess. Now, little Boots, he was running as fast as he could, and he wound down that road till it got so narrow it was only good enough for a carriage, and he got to that big iron gate, and he slipped through, and he unlatched it, and he opened the gate, and he ran up to the castle, and he knocked on the door, and the door opened, and there was the ogre. "What do you want?" he said. "Well," said Puss, "I heard there was an ogre that lived in this run-down-looking castle, and I thought I'd just come and see it for myself." "Run-down castle? What are you talking about? This is the finest castle in all the land. Get in here and let me show you around." "Okay," said Puss in Boots. Well, it was glorious, spectacular. It was so beautiful. And there, spread out on a banquet table, was a feast good enough for an army. And Puss in Boots looked over at that table and he said, "Are you expecting some company?" And he said, "Company? No, that's my lunch." "Oh, well, I mean, you are kind of a big guy. So I heard that you could turn yourself into any animal, that ogres have that kind of power." "That's right, we sure do." "Well, maybe you could turn yourself into, say, a lion." "Oh, that's easy." And quick as a wink, he turned himself into a big, giant, ferocious lion. Whoa, whew, that scared Puss a little bit. Oh, and he tried not to show it. "Well, that's kind of impressive, I guess. I mean, you're really big, so I guess turning into a big animal isn't really all that hard for you. I'm wondering if it's possible, I'm sure it's not, that you would be able to turn yourself into a little mouse." "I can do that," roared the ogre lion. And sure enough, he turned into a little mouse. And as soon as he turned into a little mouse, Puss ate him up. And then he scampered around the whole castle, telling the servants, "You no longer work for the ogre, you work for the kind and gentle Count Herman." Oh, the servants were overjoyed. "We work for the Count Herman." That's right, and to celebrate, the king is coming to visit. Well, they all rushed out. And as they got to the courtyard, there came the king's beautiful carriage. And it stopped. The servant opened the door, and out stepped the king. Out stepped the princess, and then out stepped Count Herman. "Welcome," said Puss in Boots, "to the Count Herman's castle." Well, the king couldn't believe what he was looking at. And the princess, she was in awe. "Isn't it beautiful?" said Puss in Boots. "It's wonderful," said the king. "This is a beautiful castle that you have, Count Herman." "Boy, it sure is." Yeah. So then they went inside, and the princess walked over to the count, and she said, "Is there a countess?" And Puss in Boots ran over and said, "No, no, no, there's no countess. There's no countess." "No, no, there isn't a countess," said Count Herman. "Well," said the princess, "perhaps I could be the countess." And do you know, those two fell in love immediately, and they had a wedding that day. And townspeople came, and the court came. There was enough food for everyone. It was such a joyous occasion. Well, many years later, the king died, and the poor miller's son, Count Herman, became the king, and the princess the queen, and Puss, he became their prime minister. But Puss spends most of his day still hunting grouse and pheasant and turkey, and at night he has a soft velvet pillow, and he lies by the fire, and he thinks life is very good. And that was the story of Puss in Boots.
It's family night. Did you enjoy those first two stories? Weren't they good? I'm going to give you a little change of pace. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to tell you a story about growing up in North Carolina. And I'm going to talk about my grandmother. There's a picture of my grandmother. I see some gray hair out there. I'll bet there's some grandparents in this audience. Do you all love your grandma? Yes, yes, you love your grandma? That's wonderful. My grandma in this picture was almost 90, and this story goes back to between 1949 and 1955. We had a 49 Hudson. Okay. We had a 1949 Hudson, green, 2 doors, and we drove that until we got to a 1955 Pontiac. So I know that we made many trips from Ohio, where I was born, to North Carolina to my grandmother's farm. And my dad would stay home because he had to work. My mom, originally from North Carolina, would take my brother and me with her 2 or 3 times a year. And in that big old Hudson, if you remember how long they were, the distance from the back seat to the window was pretty good size. So either my brother or I would sleep up there, and the other one would sleep in the back seat as we headed down to North Carolina. We would leave Dayton, Ohio, drive across Ohio, all the way down West Virginia, cross a little bit of Virginia, and 10 miles into North Carolina to Sparta in the mountains. Beautiful, beautiful place. Green mountains, nice farm country. And our family, the Krauses, owned that land down there, 200 acres, since 1799. 1799, that's over 250 years. And our family was very patriotic. Right here's a list of 40 Confederate volunteers that fought in the Civil War, all named Krause, all from that little community around the New River there in North Carolina. And by the time I came along, born at the end of World War II, when we would go down, we would leave in the morning in Dayton, journey down, get there in the middle of the night. And Grandma would have to open the door and let us in. And of course, the first thing boys want to do when they travel a long way is go to the bathroom. And the bathroom was about 40 feet past the house, dug in, and you went into that outhouse. And in the winter, it was the coldest place in this world. And in the summer, it was the hottest place in the world, and there were wasp nests in there. But there was always a Sears and Roebuck catalog there for purposes that we know about. So we would hit the John, come back to the house, and the house was 2 stories with a cellar. Had a full basement, it had a full porch in the front and on the back. And 5 rooms downstairs around a central fireplace that heated the whole house, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. So Grandma would always send us upstairs, the boys, to sleep up there where it was the coldest. And she and Mom would talk, and then they'd eventually fall asleep. My grandma would be the first one up the next morning. Every morning she was the first one up. Hardest working woman I know. She would get up, the first thing she would do is break off some twigs and put them in the cook stove, start a little fire, put some heavier wood on it, and then she'd close the door, go out to the barn, milk the cow, and fill up that big container that they drug up to the mailbox for the dairy company to pick up and send them a monthly check. And then when she got that done, she'd stop by the hen house, gather up the eggs. So she'd be bringing milk and eggs to the house for breakfast. She'd come in and prepare breakfast. The aroma would wake everybody up, and we'd come down and eat at the dining room table. Tell stories. First liar didn't have a chance. Tell stories on each other. And the men then would be ready to go out in the fields. And in order to shave, since you had no indoor plumbing, in order to shave, they went out on the side porch after they boiled some water, heated their faces up, mirror on the wall there, and shaved, take the water and throw it in Grandma's flower bed. And then we'd all head off. Grandma, besides fixing breakfast, had fixed cornbread and milk and put them in ball jars and sent us out to the field to bale hay or whatever it was we were doing at that time. So we had a full house. My grandma had 8 kids. My grandma on my other side had 9 kids. This was the time when if you had a farm, you wanted to raise farm hands. They were part of your crop. And so the house was always full, always laughing, everybody having a good time. So in this particular case, we're living there, we're there for the summer, we're going out to the fields, we're doing all this, and we get into the ritual of the day. And the ritual of the day is you work hard all week, sweat, get dirty and all that, but you don't take a bath until Saturday night. What happens on Saturday night? Everybody takes a bath because you got to go to church on Sunday. Church is a mile down the road, and everybody walks there and everybody walks back. Just a family ritual. Now, when you think about it, outhouse, no hot water, where are you going to take a bath? Well, the farm ran down the hill from the road, and the garden was on the left-hand side, and the beehives were over here, big old cherry tree right behind the house, and there was a creek, and there was a barn right by the creek where the cows were milked and kept and so forth. And then beyond that, up the hill, up the mountain, is where the cows ran all day. So the perfect place to take a bath was in that creek, behind that barn so the neighbors couldn't see you, and in an enamel tub. 4-pawed feet sitting in that creek water. You know how cold creek water can be? Woo! Woo! I shake just thinking about it. Well, the tradition was Grandpa would go down first on Saturday night, Saturday afternoon. He'd take a bath, he'd soap up, scrub. He'd get done, he'd wrap himself up, and he'd go back to the house. And then the little boys would go down. They went down, and of course, boys get in that tub and splash and have fun and, just sing songs and do all kinds of things. But when they got done, when they said they were clean, and they never were, but when they said they were clean, they headed to the house. And then the little girls would come down. And the girls would get in the tub, and they were much more dainty than the boys. But they would sing, and they would soap each other's back, and they would tell each other how pretty they were. And then when they finished, they'd gather up. And by this time, it's starting to get dark, and it's Grandma's turn. So Grandma heads down to be last. If she's last, she can pick up all the towels and soaps and all the stuff everybody's left behind, so if she had a job to do. And this particular day, she jumped in that tub. It was still cloudy from soap from the other people, so she couldn't see the bottom of the tub. It was already cold. that stimulated her when she jumped in there and sat down. But she got a different stimulation. She felt something on her ankle. Whoa, what is that? Then she felt something on the other ankle. Oh, what is that? And so she starts clearing that water out, and what do you think she found? A snake. I heard you say it. My grandma, 70 years old, 85 pounds at her best fighting weight, flew out of that tub. Good thing the barn was there so the neighbors couldn't see her. Good thing the barn was there so her own family couldn't see her. She gathered up all her stuff. She ran to the house. She didn't cuss, but it was a blue streak. You could hear her. She was motivated. Anyway, the next day they get up, they walk to church. There's a carpenter there. And so she begins negotiating. We'll do this if you'll do that, and so forth. So they come to a bargain. Saturday, she sees the snake, feels the snake, jumps out of the water because of the snake. Sunday, they all walk to church, and God blesses them because there's a carpenter there, and he's ready to start working on indoor plumbing on Monday. They were the first house in that part of the country to have indoor plumbing. And that's my story. Thank you. When I was a boy, it didn't take me this long to pick up a piece of paint.
Hi, I'm Clayton. Summer's the best when you're a kid, isn't it? No school, no homework, late nights, late mornings, freedom, fun, sunshine, sleepovers, campouts, cookouts, carnivals, movies, making memories. One of my favorite summers growing up was the summer after third grade. We moved around a lot because of my dad's job. Every time he got a promotion, we had to move. We always stayed in Indiana, but every time we moved, I had to make new friends. Because when you're 9 years old and your dad's paying for long distance on the home line, staying in touch didn't happen. This is before cell phones and internet, which wasn't that long ago, right? So it was one of my favorite summers because it was the summer I met my best friend. We were living in Indianapolis on the south side in an apartment complex, and beside the building there was this grassy area where we'd play freeze tag. And we're running around and we're tagging and we're freezing and we're unfreezing, and all of a sudden this new kid shows up and he says, "Are you playing frozen catchers?" And I said, "No, we're playing freeze tag. What the HE double hockey sticks is frozen catchers?" And this new kid says, "Well, it's freeze tag, but where I come from, we call it frozen catchers." And I said, "Oh, okay. Do you want to play freeze tag?" And that was the start of my epic summer of sleepovers, Star Trek, and Dungeons and Dragons. But in 6 months, my dad got a promotion, and I had to tell my new best friend Matthew that we were moving, and I'd probably never see him again. Matthew said, "Why?" And I said, "Dude, Matthew, we're 9 years old. This is 1990 something. We don't have cell phones. Al Gore hasn't invented the internet yet." And Matthew said, "So, we'll keep in touch." And apparently, it was that easy, because we did. And we have, for over 30 years. And I wrote him this song. Mr. Twain, he told us a story through the eyes of innocence, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry. Hey, Tom, let's go fishing, old Huck would say. You and me by the watering hole is where we'll spend our day. A story of two friends, a story of two pals, a story of two. Mr. Twain, he knew the power between the bonds of brothers, between two. Senor Cervantes, he told us a story about Sancho Panza who followed Don Quixote. Hey Sancho, why you chasing that errant knight? He says, in his land of maidens and giants, I'm happy by his side. A story of two friends, a story of two pals, a story of two. Cervantes knew the power between a knight and squire, between two. All right, I must admit I don't read classic lit. Mark Twain and Cervantes, I'd start them then quit. But I know without reading that this story I'm living is one of two. I'll tell you a story about a game called Frozen Catchers. Thank you. There's something special about childhood when a 15-minute game of freeze tag can turn into a lifetime of friendship. I take my kids to the park now, and my daughter Jessie, she's just this little social butterfly who goes from friend to friend seamlessly. And my son Dorian, he makes friends anywhere he goes. My kids at the park recently, they were playing with these other kids, and they were playing this game. Let's see who can yell the loudest. And I'm proud to say my son won that game. I'm more proud to say that it was his idea. But if any of you out there are aspiring singers, songwriters, storytellers, and you'd like to take this song and mold it to your own personal legend, all you gotta do is change that last line. It doesn't rhyme with anything. For instance, you could do, I'll tell you a story about a time I went to Jiffy Treat. See? So go right ahead with my blessing. Just be sure to cite your sources. And go out there, enjoy the rest of your summer, be safe, make some memories.
I can do this. I have some Mike experience. Well, I dated him for a while in the, different kind of Mike, yeah. At any rate, hi, my name is Patty Callison, and you've heard some old tales tonight. You've heard some original tales. I have a story to tell you that is one of these old tales. And I'd say, well, you don't know Jack, but I'll bet you do. Now, there are a lot of Jack tales. And there's, of course, Jack and the Beanstalk, probably the most famous.
There are rhymes. Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the candlestick. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came hungry after. I'm here to tell you that apparently old Jack wasn't too bright. Now, he lived with his mother in a cabin, and she was a widow. They were very poor. You know that part of the story. Well, Jack's mother was always after Jack to go out and get a job. Well, and he would try. He really would. He'd get a job, and, well, before you know it, he'd do something kind of dumb and lose that job. But she was still after him because they were so poor. Finally, Jack got a job working for a farmer. And he decided he wasn't going to lose that job. He was going to work really, really hard, and he was going to do everything he was told to do. So Jack went to work for the farmer. And he worked really hard all day. And on this day, it came time for Jack to get paid. So Jack, he stood there and put out his hand, and into that hand, the farmer placed $1 bill. And that tells you how old this story is, because Jack thought he had a lot of money. Woo-wee! And he clutched at that dollar, and boy, wasn't his ma going to be proud of him. So he headed on home with that dollar clutched in his hand. And he was almost there when he came to the stream that ran through the property just before he got there, and there was a little bridge. So he started over the bridge, and pardon, he realized that, it was that time of day when he bet that in the shadow of that bridge there were some fish starting to gather. So he went to the edge of the bridge. Oh, look at it. There's a big one. Oh, there's one that's even bigger. And whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, whoa. He almost fell in. And then he realized he'd let go of that dollar. And as he looked out over the stream, he saw that dollar kind of floating in the air. And then it settled down on the water, and it was gone. So Jack had to head home. And he opened up the cabin door, and he walked in, and his mother said, "Where'd you get? Did he pay you? Did he pay you?" And Jack had to tell his mother what happened. Jack, you ain't got the sense you were born with. Now, son, when somebody gives you $1, you don't go walking around with it clutched in your hand. No! No, you take that dollar and you stick it way down deep in your pocket so you don't lose it. Do you think you can remember that, Jack? Jack looked at his mother and he said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll remember." Uh-huh. So the next day, Jack went to work for the farmer, all the time thinking about what his mother had told him. Put it in my pocket. Put it in my pocket. I can remember that. So he went and he worked for the farmer, and he worked really hard all day. And on this day, the farmer gave Jack a great big jug of fresh milk. And Jack looked at that jug of milk, and he thought about what his mother had said. Put it in my pocket. Put it in my pocket. Put it in my pocket. Okay. So Jack pulled open his pocket, and he poured that milk into his pocket. Ooh! And with that milk in his pocket, he started home. Well, by the time he walked in the door, his mother took one look at him and saw that milk dripping down on her clean floor, and she said, "Jack, you ain't got the sense you were born with. Now, son, when somebody gives you a jug of milk, you don't pour it in your pocket. No! You take that jug of milk and you settle up on top of your head and you bring it on home that way so you don't spill it. Do you think you can remember that, Jack?" Jack looked at his ma and he said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll remember." So Jack went the next day to work for the farmer, thinking all the while about what his ma had told him. Put it on my head, put it on my head. And he worked really hard for the farmer all day. And at the end of the day, he stood there waiting for his pay. And on this day, the farmer gave Jack a great big lump of fresh churned butter. And he thought, put it on my head, put it on my head. So he put that lump of butter up on top of his head and he got it kind of situated there. Look, Ma, no hands. And with that butter on his head, he started home. Well, it was a hot day. The sun was beating down on Jack as he headed home, and pretty soon he felt something sliding down the back of his neck and then down his collar. Went a bit further and he felt something sliding down the side of his head and dripping in his ear. And by the time he got home, his head looked like the inside of a popcorn box at the movies. It's just covered with butter. And Jack's mother looked at him and she said, "Jack, you ain't got the sense you were born with. Why don't somebody gives you a lump of butter like that? No, you don't, before you bring it home, you head on over to the wellspring and you dip that butter down into the wellspring, about 3 times to get it good and hard before you bring it home. Do you think you can remember that, Jack?" Jack looked at his mother and he said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll remember." So he went to work for the farmer, and he worked really hard all day. And the whole time he was thinking, dunk it in the well 3 times, dunk it in the well 3 times. And on this day, it came time for the farmer to pay Jack, and he gave Jack a nice, sweet, furry kitty cat. And Jack thought about what his mother told him. Dunk it in the well 3 times. Dunk it in the well 3 times. So he went over and he got the pail of water up from the well, and he took that little kitty cat by the back of its neck, and, well, he only got to dunk it once. Because that little sweet kitty cat flew up at him and scratched him on the face and scratched him on the arms and went hightailing off into the woods. So Jack had to go home and tell his mother what had happened. "Jack, you ain't got the sense you were born with. Now, when somebody gives you a little kitty cat like that, you don't dunk it in water. They don't like that, Jack. No, you put it down on the road and you get a little piece of string, you tie it around the kitty cat's neck, and then very gently you go, hee, kitty, 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 hee, kitty, 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 and you bring the kitty cat home that way. Do you think you can remember that, Jack?" And Jack looked at his mother and he said, "Yes, ma'am, I remember." So next day he headed off and he had a string in his pocket and he knew going to do just what his mama had told him. He worked really hard for the farmer all day. It came time for Jack to get paid, and the farmer gave Jack a great, big, juicy ham. So Jack, thinking about what his mother told him, got that string out and tied it around the ham. Then very gently, he placed the ham on the road and gave it a little tug and said, "Here, kitty, 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 here, kitty, kitty, kitty," and commenced to dragging that ham down the road. Now, the dogs in the neighborhood were real interested in that ham. And so as Jack was pulling it down the road, he's going, "Hey, you get away from that. Hey, bring that back." Well, by the time he walked in the cabin door, all he had was a ham bone hanging from the string. And Jack's mother looked at him. "Jack, you ain't got the sense you were born with. Now, when somebody gives you a ham, yeah, tie a string around it, but then you fling it on your back and you carry it on home that way. Do you think you can remember that, Jack?" And Jack looked at his mother and he said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll remember." So with the string in his pocket, he went to work for the farmer the next day, and he worked really, 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 really hard all day. And at the end of the day, it came time for Jack to get paid. And on this day, the farmer gave Jack a donkey. Jack got his string out, and he looked the donkey in the eye. They took that string and he tied it around the donkey's neck. And they held on to it, and then they scrunched down kind of low. So pretty soon, that donkey was riding on his back. Needless to say, the donkey was kind of confused about that too. But with that donkey on its back, Jack headed home. Now, in the town, there lived a rich man. And this rich man had a sweet little daughter. But the thing was, this young girl had never said a single word in her entire life. And he'd taken her to all the doctors, and all they could say was, "Well, we don't know what's wrong, but if you could just get this little girl to laugh, well, that would uncork everything, and she'd be fine." Well, her daddy tried everything. He made big faces, and he told jokes, and did all of that dad stuff, but she wouldn't even smile. Well, finally, he let it be known that anybody who could make his daughter laugh, why, he would give that person half of everything he owned. And so, one day, that little girl was sitting on her porch swing, swinging back and forth, looking so sad, so melancholy. And she looked up. "Daddy, Daddy, come here, you gotta see this." And her dad came running out of the house. He picked up his little girl and gave her a swing around. She had spoken. She'd called him Daddy, and he looked up to see who had made his daughter laugh, speak. And there he saw Jack coming down the road with a donkey on his back. Now, that rich man was true to his word, and he gave Jack half of everything he owned. And you know, it's a good thing, too, because old Jack didn't have the sense he was born with.
Well, we seem to have a number of silly folk in our repertoire today. My name's Jenny Ritchie. I'm delighted to be here to tell you a story, and I am going to tell you about Yanni. Yanni is a happy man, and he should be. He's going to go see his sweetie. He doesn't mind that the road up the hill is steep and rocky. His sweetheart's at the end of it. The sun is hot, but oh, on his shoulders it feels like a hug. And he takes a deep breath. The air is fragrant with the smell of the lavender and the thyme blooming. And he hears the happy humming of the bees in the blossoms. Oh, he sings. He dances along with the puffs of dirt that his feet raise from the road. Yanni is a happy man. He's going to see his sweetheart. However, around a corner of the road, there's an old stone fountain, and right by the fountain, there is a dragon. "Hello," says the dragon. "Hello, my dinner." Dinner? No, I'm Yanni. "Hello, my Yanni," says the dragon, "my dinner." Yanni is face down in the dirt. He's shaking. He's screaming, "No, don't eat me. Don't eat me." "But I'm hungry," says the dragon. "I am hungry, my Yanni, my dinner." All Yanni can think about is his sweetheart. But my sweetheart is waiting for me. She's cooking my dinner." The dragon looks at Yanni. He looks a little dry, a little dusty. "Well," says the dragon, "you could go see your sweetheart. You could go eat that fine dinner, and then you could come back all stuffed and savory, and I could have my dinner. Will you promise, Yanni?" Yanni scrambles to his feet. "Oh, yes," he says. "Oh, yes, I promise I will come back." And up the hill goes Yanni, and the dragon waits by the old stone fountain. All the way up the hill, Yanni's been thinking about that dinner. He's imagined the lamb roasting, and he's imagined the eggplant cooling. He's imagined the cheese pies, and oh, he's been looking forward to it. But as he goes up the hill, he is not a happy man. The sun is hot and oppressive on his shoulders. He hears the bees humming a funeral dirge. His feet drag through the dust they once danced in. He thinks of his promise. He promised the dragon he would go back. He has no hunger anymore. He drags up the steep, rocky road until his sweetheart sees him coming. "Yanni," she says, "Yanni, my lover, you're here at last." But Yanni looks at her sadly. "Oh, why do you look so woeful?" says his sweetheart. "Do I no longer please you?" "Oh," says Yanni, "yes, you please me. Oh, Glikyamu, you please me very much, but I have a trouble." "Oh," she says, come in, sit and eat. It's a long road up the mountain and you're tired, and after you've eaten, your trouble will seem lighter." Yanni looks at her. He thinks of his promise. He just can't eat anything. He only manages to eat half of the lamb. He can only eat 2 big scoops of the eggplant. He can only eat 5 or, 6 of the little cheese pies. And the whole time he's eating, he's sighing, he's moaning. And his sweetheart says, Yanni, eat something sweet and let your troubles go. Eat some custard with honey. Eat some fruit and some nuts. And Yanni, he can barely get to the bottom of that deep bowl of custard and honey. He leaves half of the nuts and fruit. And his sweetheart sees that his trouble has not left him. So she says, Yanni, tell me your trouble. What makes you moan so? Oh, says Yanni, I must leave you. I must say goodbye and see you no more. It's farewell, Yamu. We must say Yasu. I must leave now and go. Now Yanni's sweetie loves him deeply, loves him completely, but it's not for his brains. She says to herself, if he's going to get out of this trouble, he's going to need me. So she says, Yanni, don't speak of goodbye. Wherever you go, I will go with you. No, says Yanni. No. Where I am going, no maid may go. Yanni, she says, you need me. You need me to fix your meals. You need me to fluff up your mattress. You need me to pull up your cover. I will go with you, Yanni. Oh, no, he says. No, where I am going, there will be no eating. And where I am sleeping, there'll be no mattress and no blanket. No, you must not come with me. We must say goodbye. But Yanni, she says, wherever we go, our love will protect us. I will go with you. Yanni is not going to win this argument, is he? No, when he gets up to go down the mountain, his sweetheart is with him with her arm tucked firmly on, her hand tucked firmly on his arm. And there they go down the mountain like two sweet doves flying into a fowler's net. For around a curve of the road, there's an old stone fountain, and waiting by the fountain is the dragon. He sees them coming. His eyes are gleaming. He calls out, my dinner comes double. Oh, Yanni, you have brought me a scrumptious dessert to go with my dinner. Yanni's sweetheart sees right away what kind of trouble he's in. And she just gently lets him step aside, and she steps up closer to the dragon. Yanni, she says, is this skinny, scrawny thing the dragon that you brought me down here to see? Huh? Why, the dragon I cooked for your dinner was twice as big as this and had more fat on it. The dragon thinks, what? But still, says our sweetheart, still, if I cut there and carve there, and if I put it on a spit, it would make a very nice appetizer. Yes, Yanni, I think we can use it. The dragon stares at Yanni. He says, Yanni, who is this sweetheart? Yanni, whose daughter is she? Yanni is standing there with his mouth open. And his sweetheart says, oh, I am the daughter of thunder, the granddaughter of lightning. With my thunder, I'll crush you. With my lightning, I'll spear you. I'll skin you and cook you, and Yanni and I will eat you. Uh-oh, says the dragon. Mistake, says the dragon. and he leaps like a goat for the mountain. He scrambles up to the top and hides among the rocks. And he never comes down to bother friend Yanni again, not ever. And now, Yanni is a happy man, as he should be. He has a sweetheart who can cook and who can take care of dragons. We should all be so happy. We're so glad you came to join us this evening for stories, and we hope you'll come back again for our next event, which will be in October. And of course, we'll be trying to scare you that time instead of making you relax and laugh. But if you're interested in the Storytellers Guild, there's a little place at the bottom of your program to leave us your email, although I think many of you are already on that email list. We hope, if you're not, that you'll get your name on there, and then we can let you know when things are happening. We want to thank the Monroe County Public Library. Where did you go, Monroe County Public Library rep? Yes, yay, Dana, yay. Thank you for inviting us and for sponsoring this program, and also thanks to Cats. And you'll be able to see the program over and over again as soon as they get it up. So we want to encourage you to go home and tell stories. Tell each other something funny, something you remember, or make up something wild. Anyway, have a good night.